most exhilarating experience in my young life. Little did I know the danger we were in. Then, one day my mother told us to be careful. She was a nurse, and so she had found out that the communist authorities had evacuated most of Leipzig's hospitals and stocked up blood supplies. They were preparing for heavy casualties. Later, we learned that Communist Party leader Erich Honecker had issued the order to stop what he called the counter-revolution. On October 9th, heavily armed units of the workers' militia converged on the city center. They had their guns trained on the demonstrators. And all they needed was a pretext to attack. As the demonstrators passed the headquarters of the secret police, the so-called Stasi, infiltrators in their midst tried to provoke an incident by attacking that sinister building. They pretended to be protesters, but were in reality secret policemen. But carrying candles and singing hymns, the demonstrators, Christians and non-Christians alike, placed themselves protectively between the provocateurs and the Stasi structure. They were following faithfully the admonition given to them by pastors and priests just before setting out on that Monday march, which proved to be the one that sealed the fate of the East German state. And in all downtown churches, Lutheran, Catholic, Reformed, ministers quoted from Proverbs 25:15. With patience a ruler will be persuaded, and a soft tongue will break a bone. And so it was. Without triggering violence, they softly felt that 40-year tyranny into which I was born. So I'm a witness to the fact that Christians played a key role in this momentous development. We hoped that Eastern Germans would now return to the church, but unfortunately the opposite happened. Hundreds of thousands turned their backs on the church after the German reunification. And today, Eastern Germany and the Czech Republic are the most de-Christianized parts in Europe. But this is not the end of the story. Over the last few years, industrial and corporate leaders have been calling with ever-increasing urgency for the reintroduction of Christian values to the workplace. Among the supporters of this movement are top executives of hallmark firms such as BMW. This is an exciting and rapidly snowballing development in which I am professionally involved. I'm looking forward to telling you more about this in this evening's session. Thank you very much.
I have to add that Matthias Concordia is not only a journalist, but he's actually also an ordained pastor in an evangelical Lutheran church of Saxony, although he is not paid by the church, but he actually serves on his free weekends, preaching and presiding in churches during Pope supply, but also preaching and conducting services in senior homes in Leipzig, singing hymns. Before there was a Cold War, there was a hot war. Germany started this, World War II, there's no argument about it. But today I would like to draw your attention to a little-known feature of any war fought on home territory. Women bear the brunt of it, at least as much as soldiers in combat. Women do heroic deeds to keep their families alive. Women become the mainstay of society, for there are so few men about. Men are either dead, or wounded, or in POW camps. They're not there. Or in combat. This afternoon I'll tell you more about this from my own observations as a child in World War II. Our next guest, Dr. Angela Thompson, was a very young girl when her hometown of Dresden was annihilated in Allied air raids. And when the Soviets replaced Nazi tyranny with a communist dictatorship. Dr. Thompson was still a child when she finally fled with her family to West Germany. She has written a stirring book about these experiences in a unique genre by paying homage to her mother. In Blackout, a woman's struggle for survival in 20th century Germany, she has made herself her mother's voice. Dr. Thompson will now read to you some excerpts from her work, and then more, of course, this afternoon.
Good morning. Thank you so much for coming, and especially for the students that are here. I'm very happy to see you. I'm very glad to be here today as part of a celebration of the Day of German Unity, or German Day, at this university. The day when the wall in Berlin fell 20 years ago was really the most joyous event in my life. I laughed and cried all at the same time. I was extremely relieved and happy beyond words. This momentous event in our history was not only the beginning of German unity, but it united all of Europe once again, and it made the European Union possible, and I am all for the European Union. It changed the Western world in the last 20 years that we can't even think of yet today. But 65 years ago, we were nearing the end of World War II. It was during those final months of the war, in the winter of 1945, when German cities were hit with the worst series of bombing attacks. Among the cities was Dresden, where I was born. My mother and I survived the most infamous bombing of any city. I would like to read a few paragraphs from my book, Blackout, A Woman's Struggle for Survival in 20th Century Germany, in which I describe the bombing of Dresden. We were living in an apartment house in the center of town. They were all about 3 to 4 stories high brick buildings. I'll begin my reading as my mother realized that we had to leave the cellar of our apartment house after the second bombing within 4 hours because we feared that it might collapse and bury us underneath in the rubble. And as we were leaving the house, the city was in flames. The street was in flames in front of it. And this is my mother speaking. My mother talked about all of these events, not just the bombing of Dresden, but all of these events in the 20th century, over and over again. And so I thought that I really had to write down these stories so that my children and grandchildren would know about them. And then in the end, this book came about. A hellish dark red light flickered through the front door windows, and I hesitated to leave the protective hall. I feared that we would suffocate or burn to death instantly. The Fürstenstraße was as light as day. For a moment I thought it was light enough to read the newspaper, and yet it was difficult to see things clearly because of the heavy smoke and particles flying through the air. The noise and stiff wind, which they later on called the firestorm, almost robbed us of our senses. I could hardly understand my own words, and I turned around to my mother, my grandmother, who was right behind me. We mustn't lose each other, I thought. It was as if we were walking straight to our death. The town was a sea of flames. Our house was one of the few on our street that still stood unharmed and dark. Not even our roof was burning. I saw that when I looked up wistfully one last time as we walked away. By then I knew we would not be back, because the fire from the neighboring houses would reach it any minute, and with the speed the flames were moving toward each other, merging, shooting high up into the sky, consuming with frenzied speed everything that would burn. The bombs had torn open the street, digging deep craters into the pavement, which hindered the fleeing people. The street surface was hot and steaming. The soles of our shoes fluctuated with every step. Brick walls collapsed with a roaring thunder. Complete outer walls of houses came dumping down into the sidewalks in front of us and behind us, while the bricks rolled all the way to the center of the street. Small and large objects shot through the air and came crashing down unexpectedly, throwing people to the ground. Bodies were lying on the street, some burned to the point of being unrecognizable. Injured people called for help. I repeated to myself, keep going, we must get away from here. Don't think about anything, don't stop, don't look. People shrieked in terror, sank down before our eyes, but how could we have helped them? I had to think of you children. Some red-hot objects hit me at the hairline, burning my hair, but the wind had already swept it away before I could wipe it off. My throat felt so sore that I could hardly speak anymore, and my lungs were beginning to burn from smoke inhalation. The pressure on my chest increased. I panted and coughed, but I couldn't find a lozenge in my coat pocket, although I always had some, especially during the winter. Neither could we stop to drink anything. Flames shot out of windows and leapt up the outer walls of houses. Roof tiles were flung through the air, hitting us on the back, while the raging firestorm swept with unnatural force down into the streets, lifting people off their feet, carrying them along several meters and then dropping them again. They screamed, fell to the ground, could not get back up fast enough, and were trampled to death by the shoving masses. I saw people flaring up like torches and burned to death before my eyes, and no one could save them. It seemed that if you had touched them or their clothes, you caught fire too. The firestorm tore a child out of a mother's arms right in front of my eyes, throwing it into a burning puddle. She ran after the child, reaching for it, caught fire herself, and so they both burned to death. You never knew where the flames might catch you. I witnessed the whirlwind tear the clothes off people's bodies, then grabbing them, sucking them along the street, and suddenly change direction, leaving them for dead. I knew that we were on the Fürstenstraße, but I had lost all orientation on the street where I knew every house, every wall, every tree, and every lantern and streetcar stop. I could not estimate how far we had come, but realized suddenly that we were headed in the wrong direction. It was an intuition which helped me with my decision to turn around and walk against the stream of people to try to reach safety in the Große Garten, the big park in Dresden. The park was closer than the Elbe River, and I knew that we would get enough oxygen there to breathe more freely again, and we would be relatively safe from falling and burning objects. We turned around in the middle of the street, against all instructions and previous agreements with friends and neighbors, against all better judgment and the generally accepted opinion that the meadows along the Elbe River would be the safest place in case of a bombing attack, and headed in the opposite direction. We had to fight hard against the increasing number of people who stumbled toward us from the old town, so that we were repeatedly in danger of being trampled down. The further we walked, the easier it got, and although the street was covered with rubble in some parts, we succeeded in making our way through the debris. The town to our left was all ablaze. I hardly dared to look up. Many houses were already burning to our right also. Surrounded by flames, I had no time to think. The will to escape the fire drove us ahead toward the safety of the garden, where the air improved. I will read more this afternoon. I want to stop here now. If you are interested, I put some books out on the back table and also some cards for me. Thank you so much.